The first thing I heard was the necklace. Not the rain, not Nico shouting behind me, not the club door slamming so hard the brass handles shook. The first thing I heard was the tiny metallic click of St. Michael hitting the stone curb after my brother's hand tore it from my throat. I went down on one knee in a puddle to catch it before it slipped toward the gutter. "Leave it!" Nico snapped from the doorway. His expensive coat was dry. Mine was still inside, probably hanging on the hook where I had left it, because men like my half-brother always forgot that cruelty could be practical too. "You're done here, Adriana." I closed my fingers over the metal. Rain soaked through the thin black fabric at my shoulders. My hair clung to my cheeks. There was blood on my tongue where my teeth had cut the inside of my lip. I could taste metal and old anger. Behind Nico, music still pulsed through the walls of the club. Bass, laughter, glass. Life continuing as if I had not just been dragged through a private hallway and told that the little jewelry shop my mother had left me in her will no longer belong to me because Nico had leveraged it against debts I knew nothing about. "You forged my name," I said. He shrugged. "I improved your future. With loan sharks. With business associates." Rain rolled from the end of my nose. I stood carefully because I knew from experience that men like Nico enjoyed the sound of a woman scrambling more than they enjoyed winning itself. I would not give him that. My necklace clasp had snapped. The chain hung loose in my hand. St. Michael's engraved wings were scratched, one edge bent from hitting the curb. Instinct moved faster than humiliation. I pinched the broken clasp between my fingers, turned it toward the streetlight, and began to force the hook back into place with my thumbnail. Nico stared at me. "Did you hear me?" "You have nowhere to go." That landed. It landed exactly where he wanted it to, in the center of my chest, where fear had already started to make a room for itself, but I kept working the clasp. My mother had taught me that when something precious broke, the first thing you did was steady your hands. Panic came later. Tears came later. First, you kept the thing from becoming more broken. So I fixed the metal in the rain while my brother smiled at me like I was finally where I belonged. That was when the street went quiet. Not empty, quiet. A black car eased to the curb, not flashy. Not loud, the sort of car meant to be noticed only by people who understood why they should notice it. Two men got out first. Broad shoulders, dark coats, no wasted movement. Then a third man unfolded himself from the back seat. He was not the biggest of them. That was the first strange thing. The second was the silence that formed around him, as if the rain itself had lowered its voice. He looked at Nico once. My brother straightened so fast it was almost comic. "Mr. Salvator," Nico said, and all the false swagger in him disappeared under the name. "I didn't realize you were still here." The man did not answer. His gaze was on me. No, not me, my hand. The metal glinted once beneath the club light. St. Michael. Silver, old-fashioned, the kind of devotional piece too heavy for modern taste. My mother used to say it looked like a promise forged into something you could wear. The man's face changed so slightly another woman might have missed it. A pause, a fracture. A blade-thin crack under all that control. He stepped closer. I told myself not to move back. I told myself several things, most of them were useless. He wore a charcoal coat darkened by rain at the shoulders, a black tie, no umbrella. His hair was slicked back from a hard forehead. There was nothing theatrical about him, nothing loud. Men who knew they had power never needed decoration. "Nico," he said at last. His voice was low enough that Nico had to lean in to hear it, which somehow made it worse. "Yes, sir. Who is she?" "My half-sister." Nico laughed too quickly. "A family problem, nothing that concerns you." The man's eyes lifted from the metal to my face. Concern was not the word for what I saw there. Recognition was closer. Anger, maybe, but not at me. It passed through him so fast I might have imagined it if my own skin had not gone tight with instinct. He held out his hand. "For the medal," he said. I did not give it to him. One of the bodyguards shifted. The rain hissed on the curb. My fingers tightened around the silver. "It's mine," I said. Nico made a strangled sound. "Adriana." The man's gaze sharpened. I expected irritation. Men like him were never told no by wet women on sidewalks. Instead, he said, "I know." That should have frightened me more than it did. Maybe I was too cold already. Maybe fear had become so ordinary in the last year of living under Nico's debts that it had started to lose its shape. He extended his hand again. "Let me see it." I looked at his palm. Clean. Scarred over the knuckles, motionless. "If you're going to take it," I said, hearing my own voice shake and hating it, "take it. But don't make me ask you not to." That was the moment. I knew it later because he told me so much later, with my name in his mouth like something careful. But even then I felt it. Something in him went still in a different way. Not calmer. Worse. No one in his world, I would learn, refused to bargain for mercy. Everyone asked for something. More time, one more chance, a smaller punishment, a softer ending. I fixed my broken clasp and refused to beg. He took the metal from my open palm with more care than Nico had ever used touching any living thing. He turned it over once. Rain beat it on the silver wing. On the back, worn nearly smooth by years against my skin, were the faint initials MC. His jaw locked. "Where did you get this?" "My mother." "What was her name?" "Marina Belli." For the first time he looked hit. Nico saw it too. Greed brightened his whole face. "If there's some issue with the necklace, Mr. Salvetter, I'm sure we can settle it privately. Adriana doesn't understand what she has." The man handed the medal back to me. "She understands enough." Then he looked at Nico the way Winter looked at the last leaf on a tree. "You put your sister in the rain." Nico swallowed. "Sir, with respect, it's a family matter." "Not anymore." I did not understand what happened next in sequence. I understood it in sounds. Nico trying to protest. One bodyguard stepping forward. The sharp crack of a knee meeting stone. My brother's breath leaving him in a sick animal noise. No drawn-out scene. No shouting. Efficient violence was more frightening than rage. It made room for no appeal. The man never raised his voice. "Bring her coat," he told one of the others. Then to me, "You're coming with me." I should have refused. Every warning my mother ever gave me rose like smoke in the back of my throat. Powerful men did not rescue women for free. Powerful men who recognized heirlooms did not appear in rain by accident. And yet Nico was on his knees. The street was cold enough that my feet were numb inside wet shoes. I had $53 in my purse and nowhere left to sleep that night. "I don't know you," I said. "No," he said, "but I knew that medal." Something in the way he said it made the rain feel older. A bodyguard returned with my coat, another with my bag. Dante Salvetter, because now I knew his name from the way everyone else feared it, opened the rear car door himself. No flourish, no smile, no promise. Only that impossible stillness and a decision already made. I looked once at Nico. He would not meet my eyes. Then I slid into the warm, dark leather of the car, with St. Michael cold against my throat again. The door closed with the sound of one life ending and another locking behind it. I woke to linen sheets, silence, and the kind of ceiling people only had when money stopped being numbers and became architecture. For 3 seconds, I thought I was still 17, and my mother was alive, and the world was only temporarily cruel. Then I turned my head and saw my dress from last night hanging dry and pressed on the wardrobe door, my shoes lined beneath it, and my necklace resting on the bedside table beside a glass of water. Memory came back all at once. Rain, Nico, the car, Dante Salvetter watching my medal like it had spoken. I sat up too fast. The room tilted, then steadied. My coat, my bag, even the little repair roll I kept for work, pliers, loop, clasp pins, a cloth, had been placed neatly on the desk by the window. Whoever had undressed the night from my belongings had done it without rummaging. That unsettled me more than a mess might have. The bedroom was enormous in a restrained way. Cream walls, dark wood. A single painting of a harbor at dusk. No photographs, a locked door on one side. Another door open, leading into a marble bathroom still faintly fogged from the shower someone had run for me before leaving. A note sat beneath the glass of water. "Get dressed. Eat first. Questions after. DS no please." No explanation. I should have been furious. I was furious. I was also hungry enough that my hands shook when I stood, and anger had never fed anybody. The dress they had left me was not mine. Soft gray cashmere, long sleeves, simple cut, expensive enough that even touching it made me tired. I changed anyway because my only alternative was yesterday's damp humiliation. The hallway outside my room was quiet, thick-carpeted, and long enough to make footsteps feel intentional. The house smelled like coffee, lemon polish, and something richer floating up from below: garlic in butter, bread warming, tomatoes. Human smells, dangerous ones. The sort that made captivity feel almost civilized. I followed the scent down a curved staircase into a kitchen bigger than my mother's entire apartment. An older woman in black slacks and a navy blouse stood at the stove with a wooden spoon in one hand like it was a weapon she had earned. Silver threaded through her dark hair. Her eyes flicked to me, took in everything, and softened by exactly half an inch. "You're the rain girl," she said. "That's one way to put it. I'm Rosa." "Sit." I sat because she did not sound like a woman people argued with twice. At the kitchen island, a man in a fitted black tracksuit was peeling the label off a yogurt cup with the concentration of a surgeon. He had warm brown skin, designer glasses, and the face of someone born to gossip in confidence. He looked up at me. "Do you like me instantly, or does it take time?" I blinked. Rosa did not. "Tio, if you flirt before coffee, I'll poison you slow." He put a hand to his chest. "This is why my love remains unreturned. It remains unreturned because you say things like that with your whole face." He sighed to the ceiling. "Adriana, I want you to know I was once a dangerous man." "No, you weren't," Rosa said. "I carried cash in Palermo at 19. You fainted during a nosebleed last Thursday. It was a pressure event." Despite myself, a laugh escaped me. Small, rusty, it startled all three of us. Tio brightened. "There, I heal. It's my ministry." Rosa set a bowl of hot tomato soup in front of me with half a grilled cheese sandwich cut into triangles so precise I nearly cried. "Eat before he starts performing." I had not been taken care of in so long that simple kindness felt almost invasive. I looked down to hide it. My phone was beside the bowl. "I charged it," Rosa said. "One missed call from a number that thinks too highly of itself." "Nico." I turned the phone face down. Tio leaned in confidentially. "Good instinct. Anyone who calls before 9 with family energy is usually evil." "Tio," Rosa said. "What? I'm setting a tone." I took the first spoonful and nearly closed my eyes. Hot, basil-heavy, smooth. My throat hurt when it went down because that was what happened when you stopped being held together by adrenaline. "He doesn't eat breakfast here," Rosa said. I looked up. "Who?" She gave me a look that made the answer unnecessary. Of course Dante Salvator did not eat breakfast like normal people. Men like that probably swallowed espresso and instructions and kept moving. "What am I doing here?" I asked. Rosa stirred the sauce on the stove. "You'll ask him that. I'd rather ask now." "I know." Tio peeled the lid fully off his yogurt and frowned. 14 grams of sugar. "This house is against me." Rosa took the yogurt away without looking and replaced it with scrambled eggs. He stared at them like betrayal had become edible. "That is not a compromise. That is an intervention. Eat the eggs. Death first. Not in my kitchen." The back door opened. Nobody announced him. Nobody had to. The temperature of the room changed, not literally. Something subtler. A line tightening. Rosa kept stirring. Tio sat up straighter and started eating the eggs as if he had loved eggs since childhood. Dante came in already dressed for the day in a black suit that made the kitchen look briefly unreal. He had a phone in one hand, an unreadable expression on his face, and rain still caught at the edge of memory somehow, as if bad weather belonged to him now. His gaze found me first. "You slept," he said. I put my spoon down. "Eventually. That's something." He ended the call without looking at the screen and set the phone aside. His attention moved to the bowl in front of me. Half gone, some private calculation seemed to ease. "I want answers," I said. "I know, and I'm not staying here as leverage for whatever happened last night." "No one said leverage." "Then what?" He looked at Rosa. 5 minutes. She nodded once, then pointed the spoon at Tio. Take your tragic eggs and go. Tio slid off the stool, gathered his plate, and murmured as he passed me, if he looks soulless, it's just before coffee. Mostly. Dante waited until they were gone. The silence he left behind was not empty. It was built, deliberate. He set something on the counter between us, my necklace. I had it examined, he said. I went cold. You had no right. I know, no apology, just fact. The clasp was repaired by hand more than once. Fine work, old tools. Likely taught, not self-learned. My mother taught me, so you repair jewelry. I restore it. His eyes lifted. Good, then you'll appreciate accuracy. I hated that part of me did. He rested one hand on the marble. Scarred knuckles. Quiet power. The medal you're wearing was commissioned 20 years ago with one other piece exactly like it. My throat tightened. It belonged, he said, to my sister. I stared at him. That's impossible. No, his voice stayed calm. What's impossible is coincidence at this scale. He pushed the necklace toward me. Your mother worked for a woman named Myrla Conti before she married Bruno Belli. Did she ever tell you that name? My fingers hovered over the chain. Myrla, I knew it. Not from my mother's stories exactly. From the way she had once whispered it in sleep after fever, like a prayer she regretted. Once, I admitted, Dante watched my face too carefully. Your mother was at a Salvator safe house the night my family was betrayed. Why would she be there? That, he said, is what we're going to find out. I touched the metal, cold silver. Familiar weight, and until then, you stay here. My laugh came out wrong. You really think you can decide that? He did not even blink. Yes, I looked at the locked pantry door behind him, the knives hanging on a magnetic strip, the sunlight cold on polished marble. I thought of Nico on his knees, of having nowhere else. Of how quickly protection could become prison. What are the rules? I asked quietly. His gaze held mine. You don't leave without telling me. You don't answer calls from your brother. You don't lie to me again. I haven't lied. You knew that medal mattered. I opened my mouth, closed it. My mother had told me never to remove it, never sell it, never let a belly man pawn it, no matter how bad things got. I had not known why, only that her fear around it had teeth. Eat, Dante said. That's not a rule. It is in this house. He turned to leave. Mr. Salvator, he paused. I'm not grateful, I said. One corner of his mouth almost moved. Not a smile, something harder to classify. I didn't save you for gratitude, he said. Then he walked out, and the room felt arranged around his absence. By the third day, I understood that Dante Salvator ran his house the way a watchmaker regulated movement inside a case. Nothing looked hurried. Nothing was accidental. Men came and went through side doors with quiet shoes and colder eyes. Phones rang and stopped. Cars arrived at odd hours. Someone always knew where everyone else was. The place functioned like a living thing too disciplined to call itself one. And in the middle of it, for reasons I still did not trust, he gave me a workshop. It was a small room on the second floor with a north-facing window, a battered oak table, a magnifying lamp, and trays of broken clasps, snapped chains, loose stones, cuff links missing backs. Watch straps waiting for new pins. Somebody had cleared it in a day. Rosa stood in the doorway while I ran my fingers over the table edge. He said you'd need your own tools, she said. I looked back at her. Why does he keep doing that? Doing what? Something that looks like kindness and then refusing to explain it. Rosa's mouth thinned in what might have been sympathy. Because explanation is a kind of nakedness. Men like him prefer coats. That stayed with me while I unpacked my role. The work steadied me. It always had. Tiny mechanisms demanded honesty. Metal did not care if your heart was broken. It cared whether your hand was precise. I was resetting the hinge on an old diamond bracelet when Enzo Ferrara knocked once and came in without waiting. He was younger than Dante by maybe 5 years. Broad-shouldered, olive-skinned, with a scar tucked into one eyebrow and the sort of easy smile that let you forget, briefly, what kind of house you were in. He handled logistics, Rosa told me, which apparently meant half soldier, half accountant, half mind reader. Mafia math allowed more than 100%. You're making yourself useful, he said, leaning against the frame. You all say that like I'm a rescue dog finally learning tricks. That's not how I mean it. No, I kept my eyes on the bracelet. How do you mean it? He considered me. Like he doesn't usually bring strangers into the center of things. Center. The word made my stomach pull tight. I was not in the center. I was in a polished waiting room beside danger. You say that like it should comfort me. It's meant as a warning. That made me look up. Enzo's smile had gone. If Dante kept you somewhere unimportant, you'd be easier to lose. I set the bracelet down carefully. Are you warning me about him? I'm warning you about what notices where he keeps his attention. A cold line slid down my spine. Who, if I knew already, I'd be solving it instead of standing here admiring your solder work. That wasn't soldering. His mouth twitched. See, useful. He dropped a small velvet box on my table. Inside was a ring with a cracked emerald. Can you reset it? He asked. Yes. It belonged to my mother. She threw it at my father in 1998. Romantic history. I snorted before I could stop myself. Ah, Enzo said. There she is. Who? The girl who laughs. I laugh, rarely enough that Tio almost filed a report, as if summoned by his own foolishness. Tio appeared in the hallway, holding a green drink thick enough to repel bullets. I heard my name in sadness, he announced. Rosa put kale in my smoothie. If I die, tell them I wanted pasta. You always want pasta, Enzo said. Because it is proof God loves Italians best. He noticed the ring box. If that's your mother's emerald, don't let Adriana hear the story of how she threw it. She'll start believing women in this house are allowed anger. I already believe it, I said. Tio studied me. Good, healthy. We support female rage until it is directed at us personally. He lifted the green drink in bleak salute and shuffled away. Enzo laughed under his breath. Then his gaze shifted over my shoulder. I did not hear Dante come in. That was becoming its own kind of terror. He stood just inside the workshop, dark suit immaculate, one hand in his pocket. His eyes went first to the open velvet box, then to the ring, then to my hands braced on either side of the table. How is it? He asked. I should have been used to his voice by then. I was not. The room, I asked, or the fact that you invaded it without knocking? Both. It's useful, I said, and you still didn't knock. He seemed to accept that. Enzo straightened off the doorframe. I was just leaving. Dante nodded once. Enzo vanished fast enough to be instructive. Silence settled. Outside the window, the city wore late afternoon in smudged gold and slate. Dante came to the table and set down a folded cloth. When he opened it, my breath caught. Inside lay a rosary, black wooden beads, silver crucifix. The chain had snapped near the center, and one bead was cracked clean through. It was my mother S, he said. That he would bring this to me after only days should have felt like trust. Instead, it felt like standing near a cliff and realizing the wind had changed. I can fix the chain, I said softly. The bead too, but the crack will still be there. I know, I reached for it. The moment my fingers brushed the rosary, his hand moved too. Not to stop me, just to steady the cloth. Our skin touched for less than a second. It was ridiculous how aware I became of it. His hand was cool from outside. Mine were warm from the lamp. Something skipped in the silence between us and then pretended it had not. I drew back first. He noticed. Of course he noticed. So, I said, because I talked when nervous and silence had become dangerous. Your family keeps handing broken things to strangers. His gaze dropped to the metal at my throat. Not strangers. I hated the little pulse that sentence created. To what then? He did not answer. Instead, he lifted the rosary once more and turned it so the damaged bead caught the light. Open it, it's solid. Try, I frowned, took my loop and brought the bead close. Old wood, careful carving, hairline seemed barely visible under the crack. I pressed a pin to it. The bead clicked. Hollow, inside was a strip of waxed paper rolled impossibly tight. The room changed. I looked up too fast. Dante was already watching me. What is this? I whispered. A beginning, he said. We unrolled the paper together on the table. Not a letter, Not exactly. Tiny numbers written in a woman's neat hand. Dates, dock markers, initials. And one symbol repeated at the bottom of the page, a small hand-drawn wing. My medal. It's a ledger key, I said before I could stop myself. Dante's eyes sharpened. You know that system. My mother used something similar to track stones off book when she restored estate pieces. Not theft, provenance. Hidden ownership. The words came faster as I leaned over the page. This isn't money laundering exactly. It's storage, transfers. Someone hid where certain shipments moved through charities and church properties. And the wing, marker for a second record. I touched my medal instinctively. A paired reference. Dante went very still. Meaning, he asked, I swallowed. Meaning if your mother hid one key in the rosary, the other could be hidden in the twin object. A car horn sounded faintly outside. Somewhere below, a door shut. Life kept moving, while a dead woman's handwriting breathed between us. Dante took the rosary from the table and wrapped it back in cloth. From now on, he said, you tell me everything your mother ever said about that necklace. She didn't say enough. Start with what she did say. I looked at him. She said cruel men always want you to beg because it lets them believe they're gods. Something unreadable crossed his face. And, he asked. And she said if I ever had to choose between losing comfort and losing myself, I should let comfort drown. A long silence followed. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, Dante said, your mother was right. He took the wrapped rosary and turned for the door. Someone is moving against the family, he said without looking back. And now I know what they're moving for. The latch clicked behind him. I stood alone in the workshop with the taste of danger at the back of my throat and the sensation, not comforting, not welcome, that somebody had just pushed the first domino. Dante from the hall, Dante stood motionless for one impossible second with the rosary in his hand and Adriana's voice still in his ears. She fixed broken clasps in the rain instead of begging. She opened hidden compartments as if truth owed her obedience, and when she spoke about cruel men and gods, she sounded like a woman he had buried 20 years ago. He should have sent her away before the house learned her shape. Instead, he found himself stationing men on every entrance and thinking only one thing. If Cessair had noticed the medal too, war had already started. By the end of the week, I learned the rhythm of the house well enough to know when it was pretending to be normal. Normal was Rosa singing under her breath while she chopped parsley. Enzo arguing with a supplier in affectionate profanity. Tio reading calorie labels like they were legal threats. Men in suits crossing the hall with sealed envelopes and not looking at me long enough to be rude. Pretending was the dinner party. It's not a party, Rosa said, pinning my hair up with ruthless efficiency. It's 12 men with expensive watches pretending they are businessmen. Then why am I being pinned into silk? Because Dante said the wives will be there. Are there wives? Rosa met my eyes in the mirror. 3, 1 widow, 2 women who know things and act like they don't. Wear blue. The blue dress was dark enough to hide a bruise and bright enough to remind me I had one. Rosa fastened the last hook at my back and stepped away. Good. You look like someone a liar will underestimate. That sounds useful. In this house, beauty is useful when it listens. I touched the St. Michael medal where it rested beneath the silk. I had started doing that whenever I was afraid, which was often. The dinner was held in a long room paneled in walnut, with candles reflected in mirrored sconces and a table so polished it looked wet. Men in tailored suits sat spaced with military intention. The women wore diamonds and practiced indifference. Italian moved under the English like a second current. I felt it most when Dante entered. The room did not stand, it simply sharpened. He wore black again, he always did, not because it was theatrical. Because it made him look like he had already chosen the ending of every conversation in the room. His eyes found me at once, then slid away before anyone could call it personal. That should not have disappointed me. It did. Tio appeared beside my chair, tugging at a bow tie with visible resentment. I'd like the record to show, he whispered, That Rosa fed me fish and leaves all day so I would fit this jacket, and now they're serving veal. Your suffering is moving, I murmured. It should be. I'm weak with sacrifice. Rosa, passing behind him with a wine bottle, pinched his arm hard enough to make him wince. Smile and pour. He leaned closer to me. If I die before dessert, tell people I was brave. Dante's hand touched the back of my chair, not enough to move it, not enough to claim anything. Just a placement of fingers on carved wood that made every nerve in my body become embarrassingly literate. Sit, he said quietly. I sat. He took the seat at the head of the table. Cesare Vetrano sat 2 places down on his right. I knew his name before I knew why it chilled me. 60, maybe. Silver hair, perfect posture, expensive cufflinks, a face lined by charm rather than age. The sort of man people described as elegant when they did not want to say dangerous. He smiled at me like we had met somewhere safer. So this is Marina's daughter, he said, and I nearly dropped my glass. Dante did not turn his head. You knew my mother. Cesare folded his napkin with neat hands. Everyone knew someone back then. His gaze returned to me. You have her eyes, not Marina's, the other one. The other one? I asked. He smiled as if he had said too much on purpose. Memory gets sentimental with age. The meal arrived in courses I barely tasted. I answered when spoken to. I watched more than I spoke. That was when I noticed it. Every time Cesare addressed Dante, it was with the warmth of old authority. Every time Dante answered, it was with faultless respect and not 1 ounce of ease. A father shape, a wound shape. Halfway through the second course, Cesare asked me about jewelry. My mother restored estate pieces, I said. I learned young. And you still work. I did. You'll work again, Dante said without looking at me. The certainty in that should have irritated me. Instead it landed somewhere softer and far more dangerous. Cesare swirled his wine. Hands like yours are wasted in fear. I looked up. Then it's a good thing they're not wasted there. Silence. Brief, bright, risky. Tio coughed violently into his napkin to hide what looked suspiciously like a laugh. Cesare's smile thinned. Dante's gaze reached me like a knife laid flat. When dinner ended, the women drifted toward the drawing room. The men remained for grappa and whatever deals men like these called by gentler names. I lasted 3 minutes in a room full of powdered wrists and old perfume before I escaped into the hall under the pretense of finding the washroom. The house at night was a museum of controlled shadows. I had almost reached the staircase when voices drifted from the library door left an inch open. Cesare. If the girl knows anything, we use her now. Dante's reply came low and dangerous. She is not a tool. That is where you are wrong, Cesare said, almost kindly. Everything is a tool if it survives long enough. My fingers tightened on my skirt. I should have moved. I stayed. Then the floorboard betrayed me. The library fell silent. The door opened at once. Dante stepped out first. Cesare behind him, one silver brow raised. I had the absurd urge to say I had been sleepwalking in formal wear. I got lost, I said. Did you? Cesare murmured. Dante crossed the distance between us without haste. That was the terrifying part. Men who rushed gave themselves away. Dante never did. You were told the drawing room, he said. I preferred the hall. You prefer difficult things, Cesare said. Dante looked at him. Enough! The single word changed the air. Cesare inclined his head and retreated into the library, closing the door softly behind him. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. You're trembling, Dante said. I'm angry. That too. He reached for my wrist then, perhaps because he thought I might bolt, perhaps because I looked paler than I felt. His fingers closed around the inside of my wrist, right over my pulse. Everything in me went still. It was not a rough touch. That made it worse. The pressure of his thumb was careful, almost clinical, but the heat of his hand moved through me with humiliating speed. I became aware of the staircase behind me, the candle's smoke in the hall, the tiny click of my metal hitting the pendant button of his jacket when I took one startled breath too close. His gaze dropped to the metal, then back to my face. Careful, Saint. The word hung there. I should have objected. I should have told him I was not holy, not his, not some symbol he got to rename because my necklace stirred old ghosts. Instead, I stood under his hand and listened to my heartbeat betray me. "Why do you call me that?" I asked. His jaw shifted once. "Because everyone in this house sees the metal before they see what it costs you to wear it. That isn't an answer. It's the only one you get tonight." His hand loosened. Didn't leave. Almost. I swallowed. I heard what Cesare said. I know. He wants to use me. Yes. And you. The muscles in his face hardened, not with anger, with restraint. Before he could answer, a crash split the silence below. Glass, a shout, then gunfire. Dante moved before the second shot. He shoved me back toward the wall and turned, drawing a gun from somewhere under his jacket, so fast my mind could not keep up. Men thundered up from the lower floor. One of the sconces exploded, showering sparks. I did not scream, I could not. "Inside," Dante snapped, pushing open the linen closet beneath the stairs. "I'm not. Inside, Adriana." Another shot. Closer. I stumbled into the narrow dark. He slammed the door most of the way, leaving 1 inch of sightline, then stepped in front of it as if his body was architecture. From the crack, I saw only fragments. Enzo firing down the hall. Tio flattened behind a side table, muttering, "I knew tonight would kill me." Rosa dragging one terrified socialite by the elbow with more competence than the guards. And Dante, cold, precise, terrifying, putting a bullet through the shoulder of a man who had almost reached the stairs. No wasted motion, no raised voice, violence stripped of performance. A second attacker came from the service corridor. Dante turned too late for the knife, but not too late for the man's wrist. They hit the banister hard. The blade flashed once. Dante drove the attacker's forearm down across the rail until bone cracked. The sound went through me. When it was over, it ended all at once. One last grunt, one last body hitting polished wood. Silence so sudden it rang. Dante stayed where he was for a second, chest lifting once, twice. Then he opened the closet. "You hurt." I shook my head. My gaze snagged on the blood darkening his sleeve. "You are. It's nothing. It's not nothing." I reached for him before I could think better of it. My fingers closed on his cuff. He looked down at my hand like it had done something reckless and irreversible. "Sit," I said. He stared at me. "Please," I added, because command had failed and terror was making me brave in stupid ways. His mouth shifted, almost surprise, almost surrender. He sat on the bottom stair. Under the torn sleeve, a shallow cut crossed the outside of his forearm. Not fatal, not pretty. I went to the sideboard, found linen, brandy, a silver letter opener sharp enough to slice the cuff cleanly. When I touched his skin with the damp cloth, he inhaled once. Sharp, controlled. The cut was not what froze me. Just above it, disappearing under the sleeve, a web of old burn scars crossed his arm in pale, uneven shine. I did not ask. He saw me seeing them. For one suspended beat, the whole house seemed to lean in. Then he said, very quietly, "My sister burned before I could get to her." The confession was so brief it felt stolen. I wrapped the bandage without trusting myself to speak. My hands stayed steady, because that was what they did when my heart did not. When I tied the knot, my fingers brushed the inside of his wrist again. Another almost. He looked at the white bandage, then at me. "Thank you," he said. I had the strange thought that he did not say those words often enough to have worn them smooth. From the hall below came Tio's strained voice. "Can someone inform me whether I survived with dignity or not?" Rosa answered, "No." Dante's mouth almost smiled. Then his eyes lifted to mine, dark and unreadable and far too close. "Back to your room, Saint." This time the words sounded less like possession. That frightened me more. The next morning the house smelled like bleach and espresso. That was how violence looked after it had been cleaned by professionals. Fresh flowers in the front hall, new glass in the sconces by noon. No blood left in the seams of the wood, though I still saw where it had been each time I passed the staircase. Dante was gone before sunrise. Enzo said there were 3 warehouses to secure, 2 alliances to test, and one question nobody liked. Who had known where Dante would be and when? Who had known I would be there too? That sat like ice in my stomach while I worked in the upstairs room. I had Dante's mother's rosary open on the cloth again, the wax paper flattened beneath a loop, and my own medal beside it. The more I stared at both, the less I believed the answer was only in the paper. My mother had not taught me to trust obvious hiding places. People searched where stories told them to search. Real secrets preferred mechanics. I turned the medal over in my fingers. St. Michael with one wing raised, silver worn soft at the edges by years of touch. The repaired clasp I had fixed in the rain. Then I saw it, not on the front, on the jump ring where the chain joined the pendant, a notch too deliberate to be damaged. I took a pin from my tool roll, pressed it into the seam, and twisted. The ring opened with the softest metallic click. Inside the hollow tube of the clasp sat a strip of gold thinner than thread. My breath caught. Someone knocked hard at the door, and I nearly stabbed my own thumb. Rosa came in with a tray and one look at my face before she set the coffee down untouched. What happened? I held up the filament with shaking tweezers. Rosa crossed herself automatically. Madonna, it was in the clasp. Can you read it? Not with my eyes. I reached for the microscope lamp. Under magnification, the gold strip resolved into microscopic engraving, numbers, initials, and a church seal I recognized from old South End architecture. Rosa watched over my shoulder. Tell me if I should be afraid. You already are. Humor me, I swallowed. This is a transfer list, not jewelry. Names hidden under saints, feast days, dock arrivals under baptism records. Whoever made this was routing money and children through parish properties. Rosa went silent. Children, the word settled badly. At the bottom of the strip was one date, 20 years ago. The night Dante's family safe house burned, and beside it, two initials joined by a slash, LS/AB Lucia Salvetor, Adriana Belli, no, not me, impossible. The date was years before I was old enough to sign my own name. My vision blurred, then sharpened with horrible clarity. Not Adriana, Aurora, my mother's sister. The aunt I had been told died before I was born. I heard Dante before I saw him, not his footsteps, the silence that arrived around them. He stopped in the doorway. His gaze went to the microscope, the gold filament, Rosa's face, then mine. What is it? I looked up too fast. My mother didn't just hide something. She inherited it. He crossed the room in 3 strides. I showed him the strip beneath magnification. He bent over the lens, one hand braced near mine on the table. His cologne carried rain and cedar and something colder beneath it, like night air on stone. When he read the initials, his entire body went still. That second name, he said. Aurora Belli, my aunt. I think, my throat tightened. My mother once told me she had a sister who was good at disappearing. She said it like a joke, but I don't think it was. And Lucia. His sister's name in his voice sounded like the afterimage of a fire. I touched the edge of the cloth. Dante, this isn't just smuggling, it's movement, custody, safe transfers maybe, or children taken out before raids. My mother may have helped someone hide records the night your safe house was betrayed. His eyes lifted to mine. Or helped betray us. The words landed like a slap because they had to. I sat back. You think that? I think possibilities first. I'm not my mother. No, his voice lowered. You are not. Rosa made a small sound between them both, part warning, part pity. There's more, she said. I turned the gold strip over carefully. On the reverse was a maker's mark. A tiny wolf's head. I had seen it before. On a ledger folder, Nico, once shoved into a drawer when I walked into his office. On a seal ring worn by a man who came to the shop pretending to buy wedding bands, though his hands were too scarred for the lie. Bratva business. Russian movement through Italian channels. It's connected to Nico, I said, or the men who own his debt. Dante's jaw hardened. Volkov's people, you know them. I know what they sell. The house phone downstairs rang once, twice, then stopped. A beat later Enzo called from the hall. Boss, Dante stepped out, listened, then came back colder. They hit your shop. The room swam for a second. Is anyone empty? He looked at me too closely. But they tore the place apart. My mother's bench, her drawers. the cedar cabinet where she kept tools older than I was. Something in me caved inward with a quietness that scared me more than crying might have. I need to go. No, it's mine. It's bait. I stood too fast, knocking the chair back. You don't get to decide what I lose. His eyes flashed. I decide whether they get a second shot at you. I'm not one of your shipments. Then stop walking toward danger like one. The silence afterward was ugly. Rosa stepped out without a word, closing the door behind her. I hated him a little then, maybe more than a little, hated how right he might be. Hated that my chest tightened not only with anger but with grief, and how grief had started turning instinctively toward him as if he were the nearest solid thing. I had a life, I said, quieter now. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I knew where every tool sat. I knew which floorboard clicked by the polishing sink. I knew the smell of my mother's apron when the room got hot from solder. And now every hour I stay here, another piece of that life gets swallowed by a war I didn't start. His face changed almost imperceptibly. I know, he said. No, you know control. That's different. For a moment, I thought he would shut down and leave. That was what he did when emotion approached with its hands visible. Instead, he reached into his inside pocket and set a key on the table. Small, brass, worn smooth by years. Your back workroom, he said. I stared. You took this from Nico. I took many things from Nico. Why keep this? His gaze dropped briefly to my hands. Because I thought you'd ask for it before anything else. That almost undid me. I sat down because my knees had become untrustworthy. My mother used to say repaired things are honest things, I said to no one in particular. I picked up Enzo's emerald ring from the tray where I had left it. The crack through the stone was still visible under the lamp, green split by a pale line. You can fuse metal clean, hide the join. Make it look untouched, but sometimes the only repair that lasts is the one that admits where the break happened. Dante watched me, quiet, listening in that rare, dangerous way. I reset the emerald with a fine collar, leaving the fracture visible but secured, stronger for having confessed its weakness. When I looked up, his expression had gone distant in a way that made me think he would remember this later when alone. Someone inside knew, I said. Yes, and you already suspect who. I suspect everyone, but not equally, his silence answered. You won't tell me. Not until I know. I hated secrets. I hated even more that I trusted his caution more than my own need. He took the repaired ring when I handed it to him. His thumb brushed the visible seam. What does it cost? He asked softly. What? To leave the break showing. I looked at the ring, then at him. Pride first. He held my gaze one beat too long. That night, I dreamed of my mother soldering silver by candlelight while wolves scratched at the door. By the time Dante agreed to let me leave the house, I understood it was not permission. It was strategy wearing the shape of compromise. We go in daylight, he said that afternoon, standing at the end of the workshop table while I locked my tools. You stay between me and Enzo. You do not wander. You do not argue in the street. I might argue quietly. You won't. I admire your faith. Tio, waiting in the hall with car keys and a bulletproof vest hanging over one shoulder. Sighed theatrically. I remember when my job was driving rich people to casinos. Now it's escorting emotionally unstable Italians to crime-adjacent nostalgia. Enzo clapped a hand over his shoulder. You love us. I love carbohydrates. You are all obstacles. Rosa handed me my coat and tucked a small packet of almonds into Tio's pocket. For courage. He looked wounded. Nuts are not courage. They are what you get. My shop sat on a narrow side street under a faded sign that still bore my mother's last name in gold leaf, Belly Restoration. The front window was shattered. Police tape had come and gone. Inside, drawers were dumped, velvet trays overturned, tiny screws glittering across the floor like grit. I stopped at the threshold. The smell hit first. Dust, old metal, the ghost of solder and rouge. Home injured beyond dignity. Dante did not speak. He stood half a step behind me, close enough that if I leaned back by accident I would hit him. That almost mattered more than if he had said something comforting. I moved to the bench. The cedar cabinet had been forced, but not fully emptied. Under the false bottom, where my mother kept private repair books, I found one leather journal and a photograph. The journal went cold in my hands. The photograph was older. My mother, younger than I had ever known her, standing beside another woman with my eyes and a different mouth. Aurora. Between them, 2 children. A dark-haired girl of maybe 6 wearing a St. Michael medal, and a boy of 14 with a face already trying to be hard. Dante took the photograph before I could ask. He did not touch it like paper, he touched it like the edge of a wound. "That's Lucia," he said. "And you." His throat moved once. On the back, in Marina's handwriting, was a single line. "If the wolves come, send the children through the chapel." Enzo came in from the front room, phone to his ear, then went still when he saw our faces. "Boss!" Dante handed him the photo. "Perimeter." Enzo read the room right, which in this house seemed to count as its own religion. He moved out fast. I opened the journal, pages of repair notes, client names, measurements, sketches. Then, near the center, a cipher key matching the gold strip hidden in my clasp. My pulse kicked. Before I could speak, the first shot took out what was left of the front glass. Dante shoved me down behind the bench so hard my shoulder hit wood. "Stay!" The command cracked like a whip. Gunfire ripped through the shop, not random, controlled, 3 shooters, maybe 4. Dante returned fire from the doorway, all economy and intent. Enzo shouted from outside. Someone screamed in Russian. Tio yelled, "I hate field work." "I hate all field work." A bullet chewed splinters from the bench above my head. I flattened with the journal under my chest and tasted dust. Another shot, closer. Then a body hit the floor inside the workroom. A man had come through the back alley window. Wrong move. I saw the knife in his hand, the wolf's head tattoo disappearing under his cuff, and for one stupid second both of us looked equally surprised to find me there. He lunged. Instinct beat fear. I grabbed the soldering torch from the bench, not lit, useless as flame, but heavy enough at the handle, and slammed it into his wrist. The knife clattered. He cursed and reached again. I drove the hot repair lamp into his face. Glass shattered. He reeled. Dante reached us in time to finish it. There was no mess of rage in him. That was the horror. He struck once, twice, and the man stopped being a threat. End of sentence. Then Dante turned to me so fast it felt like the room had narrowed to his eyes. "Did he touch you?" I shook my head. Blood streaked his cheek. Not his, maybe, or maybe some was. His breathing was still too even for what had just happened. That frightened me more than shouting would have. "We're leaving," he said. The chapel from the photograph sat 3 streets away, wedged between a bakery and an abandoned florist, its side door hidden behind a wrought iron gate. We made it there under sirens and smoke and the pounding of my own pulse. Tio drove like a man negotiating with God in real time. "If this is how I die," he said, swerving around a delivery truck, "I want everyone to know Rosa still owes me tiramisu." "You stole it," Enzo snapped from the passenger seat, pressing a hand to a graze at his neck. "Stealing dessert is not a sin in wartime. In church parking, it might be." The chapel smelled of wax, damp stone, and thyme. Dust motes drifted in bands of late light. Dante locked the side door behind us and led me to the sacristy with one hand at my back steady, possessive only in function. Inside, safe for one borrowed breath, I opened the journal on a wooden table. The cipher resolved fast now, doc ledgers masked as donations, safe passage routes, payments, names. And one recurring recipient tied to every route, every transfer, every betrayal. Si Vetrano, I looked up slowly. "Cesare." Dante's face gave me nothing. "You knew," I whispered. "I suspected. He sold your family out." "Yes, and still let him sit at your table." The silence that followed had iron in it. "When you grow up in blood," Dante said at last, "sometimes the man who made you orphaned is also the man who teaches you how not to die afterward." The words punched all the air out of me. He turned away, bracing both hands on the edge of the vestment cabinet, as if the old wood were the only thing in the room allowed to witness what that admission cost him. I crossed half the room before I realized I was doing it. Dante, he looked back. There was blood on his knuckles, candlelight in the hard line of his mouth. Grief stripped down to function. I should have stayed where I was. He was dangerous. We were alone. My body was still vibrating with adrenaline and fear. Instead, I said the truest thing I had. I don't know what to do with how safe I feel when I shouldn't. His gaze changed. That was all. No smile, no step. Just that shift, the controlled crack of something he had been holding shut. He came close enough that I could feel his heat in the chapel cold. His hand lifted, stopped at my jaw, and hovered there. Almost. "If I touch you now," he said, voice roughened at the edges, "I won't stop where I should." My breath caught. The world narrowed to the space between his hand and my skin. "You stop a lot," I whispered. "For you." That landed so hard I had to look away. He touched my metal instead, one fingertip against the silver wing. The soft click of it against my collarbone felt indecent. Dante, he had wanted her from the first second. She steadied shaking fingers in the rain and repaired a broken clasp before asking anyone for mercy. It had not been beauty, though she had that. It had been discipline under humiliation, pride under threat, a refusal to beg that struck some ruined place in him still kneeling beside Lucia's fire-blackened body. And now, in a chapel that smelled of wax and old forgiveness, Adriana looked at him with fear, trust, and that terrible innocence still intact. He wanted to take her face in his hands. He wanted to ruin the world before it reached her again, so he did the only merciful thing he had left. He stepped back. "War's here," he said, and this time neither of us pretended otherwise. The war was louder than I expected and quieter too, louder in the phones that never stopped, in the armored cars now stationed outside the house. In Rose's, sharp orders to the kitchen staff to keep curtains drawn after dark. In Tio's increasingly theatrical prayers over breakfast, "Dear Lord, preserve my waistline and our freedom," preferably in that order, which made Enzo threaten to bury him under the herb garden. Quieter in the way Dante disappeared for hours without explanation and came back with a new cut, a new silence, a new weight in his shoulders. Quieter in the rooms that emptied when he entered. Quieter in me, where fear began settling into decision. By the fourth day after the chapel, I had made the mistake that cost us. Nico called from a new number just before dawn. I should have ignored it, I knew that. Dante had told me twice and trusted me once, which was somehow worse. But Nico was crying. Real or performed, I could not tell at first. He said Cesar's men had turned on him. Said he had something of my mother's hidden where no one else knew to look. Said if I wanted the original deed to the shop and the last letter Marina wrote before she died, I had to come alone to the ferry terminal lockers by 10. I did not go alone. I left a note in the workshop because cowardice likes paperwork. Then I took the back stairs and made it exactly 60 feet past the gate before Enzo intercepted me in the alley. He looked more tired than angry, which hurt. "You are terrible at stealth," he said. "I had this whole thing planned." "No, you would panic with shoes on." I hated the relief that nearly made me cry. "Dante will kill me," I muttered. "Only if he has time." We took 2 cars. We took 6 men. We took the chance away from Nico or whoever was using him. At the ferry lockers, we found no letter. We found a bomb. Small, crude by professional standards, meant less to destroy the terminal than to send a message. Enzo saw the wire a second before I did, and pushed me back so hard my spine hit the wall. The blast still caught him in the side when it went off. Metal shards, heat, the vile pressure of air becoming a fist. My ears rang. When the smoke cleared, Enzo was on the ground with blood soaking his shirt and Nico already gone. The next hours came in broken pieces. Sirens, men shouting. My hands uselessly red from pressing linen to Enzo's wound in the back of the SUV while he swore at me for crying. Dante arriving at the private clinic like judgment in human form. One look at me. One look at Enzo, no explosion of anger, which somehow made everything worse. Enzo survived, lost part of his hearing in one ear, a scar across his ribs. 3 units of blood and some easy part of all of us. Dante did not speak to me until that night. He found me in the workshop with a packed bag at my feet. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. I should have the first day I got here. He closed the door behind him. "That isn't why the bag is packed." "No," my laugh sounded sick. "Enzo nearly died because I thought I could fix one thing by myself. He chose to go, because he was cleaning up my stupidity." Dante's gaze moved to the bag, then to my face. "I arranged a passport, new name, Florence first, then south if you want quiet." My head jerked up. "What?" He set an envelope on the table. Inside, passport, cash, train ticket, a key to an apartment with no name attached. My stomach dropped. "You're letting me go. I'm making sure you can." The room blurred at the edges. This was the real door. No guards, no locked rooms, no grand speech about safety used as chains. A way out clean enough that even my conscience could walk through it. "Why?" I asked. His answer came after too long. "Because Cesare is moving faster now, because you are the pressure point. Because if staying here turns you into another grave I failed to prevent, I will burn what's left of this city and it still won't be enough." There it was, that impossible thing. Not love. He had not said love, but something with the same temperature and none of the safety. My chest hurt. "You can't decide for me," I whispered. "No." He looked at the passport as if it offended him. "But I can give you a choice." I took the envelope with hands that did not feel connected to my body. "You'd really let me walk, if you chose it. Would you come after me?" His eyes met mine. "Not if you told me not to." That was the most dangerous answer he could have given. I left before I changed my mind. The driver took me to South Station under a sky the color of old pewter. My bag felt too light for the size of the life inside it. Florence existed only as ink on a page. Freedom should have tasted cleaner than this. On the platform, I opened my phone. One unread message from Rosa. "Enzo is awake. He asked if you still owe him an apology and one decent pastry." A second from Tio. "If you vanish forever, I'll have to become the emotional support employee, and I absolutely do not have the range." I laughed, then cried, then hated myself for both. The train announcement sounded. People moved around me with luggage, coffee, ordinary impatience. A little girl dropped a silver charm bracelet near my shoe. Her mother, distracted, didn't notice. I bent automatically, picked it up, and repaired the bent jump ring with my thumbnail before handing it back. The girl smiled. "Thank you." The soft click of metal closing stopped me cold. Why her? Not a grand thing, not bravery, not beauty. Just this stupid, instinctive refusal to let anything precious stay broken if my hands could reach it. I thought of Dante in the rain watching me repair the metal before I asked for mercy. I thought of Enzo bleeding because I had acted alone. I thought of Cesare's name hidden in the roots. My mother's letter still somewhere, Lucia's photograph, the chapel, the way Dante had stepped back in order not to take what fear might have offered him. Florence was not innocence, it was absence. If I left now, I would survive, perhaps, but I would spend the rest of my life wondering which part of me had fled, wisdom or cowardice. The train doors opened. I did not get on. I turned around with the envelope still in my hand and walked back toward the city I had every reason to fear. Not because I was trapped. Because I had seen exactly what his world cost, and I chose to pay with the version of myself that still believed leaving was the same as being free. When I walked back into the Salvetter house an hour later, Rosa stared, then crossed the kitchen and slapped my arm hard enough to sting. "That," she said thickly, "is for making me worry." Tio put a hand over his heart. "The prodigal saint returns." I knew love would ruin all her common sense. I opened my mouth to deny the word love, but Dante came into the doorway before I could. He looked at the bag, at me. At the unopened train ticket in my hand, something fierce and quiet moved through his face. "I chose," I said. His gaze did not leave mine. "I see that," and for the first time since the rain, I walked toward him without being told. If I had still been pretending I could belong to the old version of myself, Chapter 8 would have broken that lie cleanly. The letter turned up that night not in a locker or a safe, but in the hem of my mother's apron. which Rosa found while mending linens because apparently women in dangerous houses did all their revelations with practical hands. The paper was brittle, the writing hurried. Marina had written it 2 days before she died. If Adriana wears the medal, she carries both memory and proof. Trust Dante only if he still stops before becoming Cesare. That line sat between us in the workshop while the house exhaled midnight. Only if he still stops, I repeated. Dante read the letter twice and said nothing, which was answer enough. Below the line about the medal, Marina had written one location, St. Bartholomew's Cellar, old registry wall. Behind the 7th brick. The church from the strip, I said, and bade if Cesare wrote the route first, Dante replied. He didn't write this. How do you know? I looked at the page. Because my mother's fear changes halfway through. The first lines are coded. The last line is plain. She thought she was running out of time. He accepted that with a single nod. Then, because apparently we had both lost the right to easier nights, we went. Not alone. Never alone again. St. Bartholomew sat in the oldest Italian district, its basement full of humidity, mildew, and the stale smell of hidden records. Enzo was under strict orders to stay behind after surgery. He ignored them and came anyway, pale but upright. Tio brought bolt cutters and enough muttered Hail Marys to qualify as a side ministry. If I get murdered in a church cellar, he whispered as we descended the stairs, please tell Rosa I was handsome at the end. She won't lie at your funeral, Enzo said. The 7th brick came out easy. Too easy. Behind it sat not a box but a key and a note in Cesare's immaculate hand. Come alone if you want the truth about your mother. Dante's expression turned to stone. No, he said before I could speak. Then he'll move the truth again. He wants separation. He wants me. Yes, the old fear rose, so did something else. Not courage, not exactly, a meaner kind of clarity. He already has a pressure point, I said. If he wanted me dead, he would have used Nico sooner. Dante's gaze cut to me. And if you're wrong, then I stop being your problem, his jaw flexed. You were never a problem. The words hit wrong because they hit true. In the end, I did not go alone. I went with a tracker hidden in my metal chain, one blade taped inside my boot, and Dante's fury trailing at a distance he hated. It still wasn't enough. Cesare's men took me before I reached the abandoned Riverside Customs House. Clean operation, no unnecessary roughness, a cloth over my mouth, darkness, cold. When I woke, I was tied to a chair in a cellar room that smelled of earth and wine rot. Cesare sat across from me at a small table with a lamp between us and my mother's letter folded neatly under one hand. You have her eyes, he said again. I looked around once. Stone walls, one door. No window, rope at my wrists. The tracker chain gone from my throat, the metal still there, though, resting cold against my skin. They had not understood what part mattered. You burned children alive, I said. Cesare sighed. No, I chose one family over another and fire took what men had already broken. Precision matters. That was when I understood the villainy of him. Not volume, grammar. Dante trusted you. He needed to, or he would have died with the rest. You made him into this. I made him survive. There it was, the mirror. Not a monster from outside Dante's world, but the hand that had shaped it and called the result love. What did you want with Lucia? I asked. Cesare looked almost tired. Leverage. Her mother hid ledgers implicating half the Port Authority, 2 bishops, and a Russian partner whose appetite outran his caution. Marina and Aurora moved the children before the sale. Lucia saw too much, so did your aunt. And my mother, she was supposed to be easier. My stomach rolled. My mother trusted you too. For a week, he said. Long enough to bury one key where no man would search, a child's devotional medal. Clever woman. He leaned forward. Tell me where the final ledger is, and Dante lives long enough to hate me properly. I laughed once, because fear had become too exhausted for dignity. You think I know. I think your hands do. He glanced at the metal. You notice seams. That chilled me more than the ropes. When he stepped out to take a call, I forced my breathing down and rolled the metal between my fingers. The clasp. They had ripped the tracker chain away and rehooked the pendant carelessly with cheap wire. Wrong size, soft metal. I worked the wire against the sharp edge of the chair bracket until it thinned. My wrists burned. The room stayed silent except for the small scrape and my own pulse. Metal gave first. The clasp opened with that same tiny click. From inside the hollow ring slid the last thing my mother had hidden there. A sliver of vellum wrapped around a micro key no larger than a fingernail. Of course, a key for the registry wall. The real one? She had left the church clue in plain writing because she knew only hands like mine would look past the first mechanism to the second. The door opened before I could free my wrists. Nico came in. For one stupid second, I felt relief. Then I saw the fear on him and understood that even now he was not choosing me. He was choosing whichever side frightened him least. I tried to keep them off you, he blurted. I told Cesar I could control it, but Dante, Enzo nearly died because of you, Nico flinched. I just needed money. No, I said. You needed worship, his face twisted. You always thought you were better than me. I thought you could still decide not to be this. That landed, not enough. He stepped closer, reaching for the metal. Give it to me. I can get us both out. I used the loosened wire like a blade against the rope one final time, snapped my right hand free, and drove the chair into his knees. He went down hard. I grabbed the lamp, smashed it against the wall, and threw the room into darkness. Nico screamed for guards. By the time the first man got the door open, I had the key in my fist and my boot blade in the other. I was not brave. I was furious and terrified and done being easy. Somewhere above me, gunfire erupted. Dante had arrived. The first man through the cellar door never expected resistance from a tied woman in heels. That helped. The boot blade caught his forearm, not deep, but enough to make him drop his gun. I kicked it under the table and ran barefoot because one shoe had already vanished in the dark, and modesty had officially lost the war. The corridor beyond the cellar was narrow, lined with old casks and damp stone. Gunfire thundered above. Men shouted in Italian and Russian. Somewhere Tio screamed, "I hate basements." Basements are where horror lives. I nearly laughed from pure adrenaline. A guard rounded the corner. I slammed the iron key into his throat, not enough to kill, just enough to buy breath, then drove my shoulder into the side door and burst into the customs house lower hall. Smoke, splintered wood. Harsh white beams from tactical lights. Enzo on one knee behind a crate, firing one-handed with the grim focus of a man too stubborn to remain convalescent. Tio crouched beside him in a bulletproof vest 2 sizes too big, reloading with shaking fingers. When he saw me, his eyes bulged behind his glasses. She's loose. The saint is loose. This is not a drill. A man came at me from the stair landing. I did not have a gun. I had a brass lamp chain from the cellar wrapped around my fist. I swung hard. He dropped. Then Dante was there. Not crossing the room. Simply there, as if the space between us had offended him and ceased to matter. His face was bloodless with fury, one sleeve dark, his gun still raised until he saw the empty space around me. For half a second neither of us moved. He took me in whole, barefoot. Rope marks on my wrists, metal at my throat, alive. Then he grabbed the back of my neck and pulled me against him so hard my teeth almost knocked together. His mouth hit my hair, my temple. Not a kiss, not exactly, a wordless check for life. I folded into him for one shameful, desperate second and felt his breath break. "You walked," he said hoarsely against my forehead. What a thing to say. "I ran," I whispered. His hand tightened once at the nape of my neck. Good. That was all the reunion we got. A shot cracked from the upper landing. Dante pivoted, putting his body between mine and the stairs before I registered the threat. "Tio," he barked. Tio popped up like a terrified saint of logistics. "I'm already having the worst night of my life. Take her out. I object spiritually. Tio," he swore in Sicilian, grabbed my elbow and tugged. "Come on, saint." The boss is in his murder feelings. "I'm not leaving without the key." Dante's head snapped toward me. I opened my fist. The tiny brass key shone in blood and cellar dust. Cesar's voice drifted from the upper floor. Calm, almost affectionate. There you are, ragazzo. Dante went still in that dangerous way that meant some private part of him had just locked into place. Go, he said to me without looking. I did not. Maybe that was love. Maybe stupidity in evening dress and borrowed courage. Either way, I climbed the stairs behind him while Tio whispered to Enzo, "Tell Rosa I died trying to supervise impossible people." The registry office on the upper level had once been beautiful. Arched windows, ledgers stacked to the ceiling, a long desk under hanging lamps. Now one window was blown in and cold night air moved the papers in pale waves. Cesare stood at the far end with Nico half hidden behind him, bleeding from the mouth and holding a gun with both hands like a child afraid of recoil. "You chose poorly," Cesare told me. "No," I said. "I just chose late." His mouth curved. "Marina would hate that answer." Dante moved forward one silent step. "Don't," Cesare said mildly. "Your sister begged, you know." The room changed shape. I felt Dante's control fracture, not shatter, not yet, but crack along a line old enough to have its own weather. "Stop," I said sharply, and both men turned toward me. It wasn't command that stopped Dante. It was the fact that I was speaking. I took the key to the old wall registry box beneath the altar plans and understood the mechanism instantly. Triple lock. Rotating ward. Clever. My hands shook once, then steadied. Insert, quarter turn, pressure release. Click. Inside lay a ledger, a list of names, and a packet of photographs. Children, roots, payments. Priests, port officials. Cesare beside Volkov, 12 years younger and equally unashamed. Proof. Nico saw it first. Panic replaced greed on his face. "Give that to me." "No," he raised the gun. For 1 second I thought he meant to aim at Dante. He aimed at me. The shot would have taken my chest if Dante had not moved. He hit me hard at the shoulder, driving me behind the desk. The bullet took him high in the side. There are moments the body does not understand. Mine spent 1 full second refusing what my eyes had seen. Then Dante staggered once, turned anyway, and shot Nico before he could fire again. Single shot. Center mass. Efficient. Final. No speech. No mercy. The consequence of touching me made flesh. Nico folded. I did not look long enough to decide what I felt. Cesare used the distraction to run. Enzo and 2 guards went after him while I caught Dante before he could hit the floor. Blood soaked my hands fast and hot. "Stay with me," I said, the stupidest possible phrase and the only one I had. He looked down at the blood as if it belonged to administrative inconvenience. "You opened it. That is not what we're discussing." His mouth moved, almost a smile, almost pain. "Bossy." I ripped open my hem, pressed silk to the wound, and tried not to let my voice break. "If you die after calling me that, I'll be offended forever." His hand found my wrist, weak only by Dante standards. "Saint." This time it was not cold, not observational. Not anything he could pretend wasn't an ache. "I'm here," I said. He watched me as if memorizing my face would be useful in darkness. Then the briefest, most impossible thing happened. Even bleeding, even with chaos still echoing through the customs house, he lifted my medal between 2 fingers. The silver clicked softly against his ring. "You still fix the break first," he murmured. My whole body went still, that was it. Why her, spoken aloud by the man himself, not as logic but as surrender? "Yes," I whispered. "Don't stop." The words felt like a vow and an order, and something too tender for either. When the paramedics finally rushed in, with Enzo cursing behind them, and Tio announcing to the room that he personally deserved sainthood for surviving, I was still on the floor with Dante's blood drying on my hands, and the knowledge settled cruel and clear between us. One of us might not survive what came next. Dante refused the hospital after they stitched him, naturally. "Of course he did," Tio muttered in the clinic corridor, eating crackers with the expression of a man betrayed by both fate and nutrition. "Because healing quietly would be too easy. Men like him need an atmosphere." Rosa smacked the back of his head. "He can hear you. Then perhaps he'll recover from spite." I almost smiled. It was how I lived those days. By dawn, the ledger had been copied 3 times and moved to 3 separate locations. Enzo coordinated loyal crews from a chair because standing made Rosa threaten him with scissors. The photographs in the registry packet connected Cesare to the old church roots, Volkov's child transfers, dock payoffs, and the Salvetor safehouse betrayal. More importantly, they showed the current destination line, Harbor 12 Old Fuel Depot. "He's running," I said. Dante, pale but upright, adjusted the holster at his back with his uninjured hand. "No, he's burning records. You can't go like that." His gaze met mine. "Watch me," I should have argued. Instead, I reached for his tie and straightened it with fingers that tried not to shake. There it was again, that ordinary act in the center of catastrophe. His hand covered mine briefly at his chest, a restraint moment so small anyone else would have missed it. He wanted more, so did I. Neither of us took it. "We finish this," he said. Harbor 12 smelled like diesel, salt, and old rust. The fuel depot crouched at the edge of the water like a thing built for betrayal. Low concrete. Corrugated roofs, cranes frozen in the gray light. Men moved into position under Dante's signals. No wasted words, no heroics. Precision. Violence with a ledger and an end date. I stayed in the command van for exactly 4 minutes. Then I saw the manifest bored through binoculars and recognized the storage code pattern from my mother's journal. "Wait," I said to Enzo. "Those numbers aren't fuel, they're diversion lockers." He looked from the board to me. "Can you prove it? Open Bay 6 before Cesare burns it." He trusted me quickly, which was either admirable or evidence of concussions. He relayed the order. Inside Bay 6 we found not fuel records, but iron file drawers and one narrow steel case with the wolf seal. Enough proof to bury half the city, and enough reason for Cesare to come out shooting. The first explosion rocked Bay 3. Fire leapt fast along old oil traces, men ducked, sirens wailed in the distance. Cesare's remaining crew opened from the catwalk. Dante moved through the smoke like it knew him, not reckless, worse, certain. I lost sight of him for 30 terrible seconds, then Cesare's voice cut through the chaos from the upper platform. "You still think this makes you different from me?" Dante stood below the catwalk, one hand bloody through the bandage, gun raised. "Yes," he said. Cesare laughed. "Because of her. Because one woman with steady hands convinced you restraint is redemption." No one spoke. Even the fire seemed to lean closer. "You taught me survival," Dante said. "You called it love so I'd forgive the shape it took." Cesare's smile faltered for the first time. "And yet you lived. At the cost you set." Dante climbed the stairs. I should have stayed back. I followed because some choices had stopped pretending to be wise. Cesare saw me and recalculated instantly. That was his genius. Human weakness as geometry. He fired at the railing above me. Metal screamed. The catwalk jolted. I slipped, hit one knee, nearly fell through open grating to the concrete below. Dante turned toward me. Cesare raised his gun for the shot Dante would never see. I did the only thing I could. I threw my medal. Stupid, precious, perfect. The silver St. Michael struck Cesare's wrist with a bright metallic crack, not enough to injure, enough to break aim. The bullet went wild into the roof beams. Dante fired once. Cesare staggered back against the rail, more shocked than hurt. For the first time, I saw fear in him, not of death exactly, but of irrelevance, of losing authorship over the man he had built. "You kill me," Cesare said, blood at his mouth, "and you prove I was right." Dante stopped 2 steps away. Smoke moved between them like memory. "No," Dante said. "I prove you end." He lowered the gun. For one impossible second, I thought he would spare him. Then he seized Cesare by the front of his coat and forced him to look at the burning depot below, at the ledgers, the children's photographs, the men dead by orders disguised as protection. "This," Dante said quietly, "is the part you never understood." He turned Cesare over to the arriving federal task force with the ledgers in plain sight and witnesses enough that no quiet death could erase the truth. It cost him. I saw it in the set of his shoulders. In the hatred he had to swallow to choose exposure over execution. Cesare had made him in private violence. Dante destroyed him in public truth. That was the wound and the refusal both. But Cesare was not finished paying. A hidden shooter fired from the warehouse roof. Enzo saw the flash first and shouted. Dante moved again, too late to fully evade. The shot tore through his already injured side and drove him to one knee. I did not remember crossing the platform. Only the iron taste in my mouth and the sound I made when I reached him. Somewhere below, guards took the shooter down. Somewhere farther off, men were shouting that the fire was contained. Somewhere a world kept moving. But on that catwalk, it was only me and Dante and blood soaking through my hands again. "It's over," I said, because I needed one sentence in the world to be true. He looked up at me through pain and smoke, and all the things that had nearly ended him. His fingers closed weakly around the metal I had retrieved from the floor and pressed it back into my palm. "It is over," he said. Cesare lived long enough to hear the charges read. Nico did not. We mourned Enzo's ear, the men we buried from the harbor, the childhood Dante never got back. And the version of me that had once believed safety was the absence of darkness, instead of the presence of someone who would step into it with you. Nothing about victory felt clean. That was how I knew it was real. War did not end with peace. It ended with paperwork, funerals, locks changed quietly at dusk, and everyone learning how to inhabit rooms no longer arranged around immediate threat. 3 months later, my shop reopened. Belly Restoration had new glass, stronger locks, and a worktable Dante claimed he happened to acquire from a retired watchmaker in Providence. It was beautiful, scarred, older than both of us, and expensive enough that I refused to thank him in the way he wanted. "I can pay you back," I said the day it arrived. He stood in the doorway, one shoulder still stiff on cold mornings, watching me test the drawer slides. "You won't. That isn't how debts work." A pause, then no. "It is." Sometimes he came to the shop late, after meetings, and sat in the chair by the window while I worked. He never interrupted unless I spoke first. Those were my favorite hours, and I hated myself a little for how much. Enzo recovered enough to return to logistics with a hearing aid. He pretended not to resent, and a scar Rosa kissed exactly once when she thought no one was watching. Which changed the internal politics of the house so dramatically. Tio spent an entire week wandering around muttering, "Love is available to everyone except me." His own heartbreak remained Rosa, who loved him in the specific way strong women love impossible men they would never date, by feeding him and calling him useless with frightening tenderness. One rainy evening in October, all of us ended up in the Salvator kitchen because storms still made me restless, and Rosa believed restlessness was best treated with simmering sauce. Tio stood at the island with a weighing scale and a bowl of pasta, bargaining with divinity. "If I eat this," he said, "I'll wake up soft." "You are already soft," Enzo replied. "In spirit only." Rosa shoved more parmesan at him. "Eat." Dante came in last, loosening his tie, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. His gaze found me at the stove. That had become the first and strangest part of every room, the moment he checked where I was before becoming himself to anyone else. I handed him a towel. "You're dripping on Rosa's floor," I said. "It's your floor too," Rosa corrected from the sink. I went still. Dante did too. Rosa did not look up. I said what I said. Tio wiped at imaginary tears. And thus the matriarch stabbed us all emotionally while basting chicken. Later, after dinner and dishes and Tio's declaration that monogamy had ruined his metabolism, the house quieted. Rain tapped the windows. I found Dante in the small back sitting room with a glass of water untouched on the table beside him. He was looking at nothing. That usually meant everything. I stood in the doorway. "Bad night. Manageable. I'm learning that means no." He looked up then, some private shadow easing when he saw me. "Come here," I did. Slowly, because every step toward him still felt chosen. He sat on the edge of the sofa. I remained standing until he reached for my hand with that same patient restraint that had nearly undone me from the beginning. Not command, invitation. I sat beside him. The room smelled of rain on brick and the cedar of the cabinet behind us. My metal rested against my throat, warm from skin. Dante touched it once, making it click softly. I had a ring, he said. I blinked. What? For Lucia, not an engagement ring. Something like weary amusement passed through him. A toy ring from a street fair, blue glass, cheap. She used to make me keep it in my pocket and swear I wouldn't lose it. The confession entered the room gently and wrecked it anyway. I lost it in the fire, he said. For years I thought if I had held onto one useless thing harder, I might have held onto her too. I turned toward him fully. Dante, he shook his head once. No speeches, Adriana. I'm trying to do this badly, but honestly. That made my chest ache. He reached into his pocket and set something on the table between us. A ring box. Simple black velvet, no flourish. I stared at it, then at him. This is not a fairy tale, he said. I can give you houses, protection, lawyers. I can give you more danger than any good man should. I can promise you that I will put your safety before my pride every day I have left. I can promise you I will fail beautifully at softness and keep trying anyway. Rain moved against the windows. He lifted the ring from the box, not huge, not vulgar. An old emerald reset in a new band, the same stone from Enzo's mother's broken ring, now flanked by two small diamonds cut from a damaged estate piece I had once restored. You repaired the crack, I whispered. No, you taught me not to hide it. The seam of the emerald was still faintly visible, stronger for the admission. My eyes filled before I had permission for it. Adriana Belli, he said, and there was no audience for the formality, only us and the storm and the life that had somehow made room for this. Stay, with full knowledge, with every ugly truth intact. Stay because you choose me, not because I built walls. I laughed once through tears. That's not technically a proposal. It is from me. I looked at the ring. At his hand holding it so steadily, when I knew exactly how much it cost him to ask for anything he could not command. Yes, I said, and the word came out smaller than I felt. But only if you understand I'm still going to argue with you in public. Something warm and astonished broke open in his face. Saint, he murmured, and the nickname held no steel now. Only wonder and home and all the long road between the rain and this room. He slid the ring onto my finger. The fit was perfect. Afterward we stayed on the sofa in the quiet dark. No grand seduction. No performance. His hand around mine. My head eventually resting against his shoulder because it had become the least frightening thing in my life to want. From the hall, Tio's voice floated in mournfully. Rosa, if they become happy in there, I require cake. Rosa answered, Sleep, fool. Dante's laugh was soft and rare and worth every surviving thing. 9 months later, the first storm of spring rolled over the city just before closing time. I was alone in the shop, except for the rain at the windows and the ticking regulator clock above the polishing bench. Business had been good enough that week to feel almost impolite. Estate bracelets. A baptism chain. A clockmaker from Beacon Hill with a pocket watch older than his honesty. Normal work. Radical work, considering what normal had once cost us. I had learned that peace did not arrive as a feeling and stay. It arrived as habits, locking up without checking the street 3 times. Drinking coffee before it went cold because no emergency interrupted it, letting myself hum while I soldered. The bell over the door rang once. I looked up already smiling. Dante stood there in a dark coat damp with rain, broader somehow than the doorway should have allowed, carrying a paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks over. You bribed me, I said. I anticipated resistance. To what? He set the bag on the counter. Cannoli, the good kind, Rosa's approved kind. Closing early. I have 2 repairs left. Tomorrow exists. Suspicious statement from a man in your profession. He came around the counter and stopped close enough that I could smell the cold. Outside on him under cedar and clean soap. The first months after the harbor, he had touched me carefully, as if proving to himself I was not another thing he could lose by reaching too fast. That caution never fully left him. It changed shape. Became tenderness. He lifted one of the unfinished pieces from my tray, a little silver charm bracelet with a bent clasp. Client, he asked. Little girl from Hanover Street. Broke it climbing a fence. He handed it back. Without thinking, I took my pliers, aligned the tiny hook, and repaired the clasp before I answered anything else. Click. The sound sat between us, bright and small and absolute. Dante went still. I looked up slowly. There it was, the same look from the rain, only nothing in it was cold now. Recognition, yes. But also grief softened by time, and love made durable by everything it had survived. You still do it, he said. Do what? Fix the brake first. His voice was quieter than the rain. Even when no one's throwing you out, even when nothing is on fire, you see what might be lost and your hands move before fear does. The room changed around that sentence. All this time, that had been the thread. Not the medal alone, not obligation, not rescue. The tiny, stubborn instinct that had undone him before either of us knew its name. I set the pliers down because my fingers had suddenly forgotten their job. You noticed all the way back then. In the rain, his mouth curved faintly. I noticed before you looked at me. You were bleeding, soaked, one breath from asking for help, but you fixed the clasp first. I laughed softly, unsteady at the edges. That was not my most strategic hour. It ruined me. The honesty of it landed so cleanly I had to brace one hand on the counter. He touched the ring on my finger, then the metal at my throat. The silver clicked gently against his wedding band now. We had married 3 months earlier in a chapel with only family, if one counted the peculiar and holy shapes family had taken around us. Rosa cried into a handkerchief she denied owning. Enzo stood beside Dante and pretended not to get emotional. Tia wore a suit so tight it could only have been revenge. I covered Dante's hand with mine. Do you regret any of it? I asked. Not the obvious parts, not me. I meant the blood, the public ruin of Cesare, Nico dying on the church floor. The men buried after Harbor 12. The fact that loving Dante had required me to accept a world that would never become clean. His answer took time. I loved him best in those pauses. I regret what it cost other people, he said. I don't regret choosing you inside it. That was the unresolved thing, maybe. Love did not solve the moral arithmetic. It simply refused to let the equation stay abstract. I leaned up and kissed him first on the jaw because I was braver now in the small ways that matter. He went motionless in that old, reverent way before his hand settled at my waist. Not demanding, never demanding. Outside, thunder rolled down the street. Inside, the regulator clock ticked. The cannoli waited. Life, ordinary and impossible, kept presenting itself. The bell over the door rang again, and Tio burst in carrying an umbrella he had somehow managed to invert against the storm. Good news, he announced, breathless. Rosa sent me to collect you both before the sauce reduces itself to tragedy. Bad news, I stepped in a puddle deep enough to alter my worldview. Dante closed his eyes briefly. I laughed into his shoulder. Tio pointed at our joined hands. Excellent, you're still in love. Disgusting. Hurry up. From outside, Rosa shouted through the half-open car window. If the cannoli gets soggy, I blame all of you. Enzo leaned across from the driver's seat and called, Bring the medal, Saint. Nana wants to see if you still wear it. The nickname had spread through the family, but only Dante's version still carried the whole history of us inside it. I turned off the bench lamp. He took the repair tray from my hands. On the way to the door, I paused to lift the little girl's bracelet and set it in the finished drawer. Fixed, waiting to be returned. Dante held my coat while I slipped it on. Same gesture as a man preparing armor, completely different meaning now. When he fastened the collar, his knuckles brushed the nape of my neck. Then, as if obeying a ritual neither of us had invented but both of us trusted, he touched the metal one last time. Click, not the sound of a door closing anymore. The sound of something chosen staying chosen. I still wondered sometimes whether love could ever justify the darkness that shaped it, or whether all we could do was build warmth stubbornly inside the shadow and call that courage. So tell me this, would you have chosen Dante knowing what it cost to stay? Not just the danger, not just the blood on clean marble floors at 3 a.m, I mean the quieter cost. The version of yourself you hand over the moment you choose a man the world built for violence, and decide to love him into something it never planned. The ordinary future you fold away. The uncomplicated life that never arrives. Because here is what I know now, 9 months past the harbor fire, standing in the doorway of a rain-wet shop in the life we built from ledger keys and broken clasps. I handed that future over willingly. Not because I was swept away, not because he was beautiful, though he was that too in the particular way of men carved by damage, not because I had no choice. I had the ticket, I had the passport. I had the empty seat on a train going south. I walked back in myself, and I would do it again. Tio was still arguing with the inverted umbrella in the doorway, one arm through the spokes, a man in genuine conflict with weather and the universe. Enzo had the car running. Rose's voice carried across the rain, warm and impatient, the sound of home made audible. Dante waited at the door for me. He always waited. That was the thing people who feared him never understood. He was terrifying in motion. At rest, beside me, he was just a man who had learned to wait for the thing he wanted most instead of taking it. That discipline, that long, private restraint, was the realest love I had ever seen. I took one last look at the shop before turning off the last light. The bench, the tools lined in their roll. The regulator clock, the small drawer marked finished, ready for return. My mother's name still in gold leaf above the window, faded now to something almost ghostly, the kind of presence that asks for nothing and gives you permission anyway. Marina, I thought. Look where it led. She had hidden a ledger key in a clasp. She had sent a medal forward through time into the hands of a daughter who fixed broken things by instinct. She had loved one man's sister enough to help a child escape a burning house and die with the secret locked in silver. I hoped she would not call it tragedy. I hoped she would call it architecture. Dante's hand appeared at the small of my back. No pressure, only presence. The question of whether I was ready answered by the warmth of contact. Ready, he asked. Almost, I said. And then, because some truths only arrive in their own time, I turned to face him properly in the light of the closing shop. She did it for you, I said. My mother. She helped Lucia because she saw a boy of 14 trying to carry a safe house on his back, and she decided one child surviving was worth the silence. He went very still. She hid your sister's name in the records under a saint's feast day, not to protect herself, to give you something to find later, if you ever looked. If you ever needed to know she had been loved by a stranger who chose correctly. The shop was too quiet for what moved across his face. He did not speak for a long time. Rain moved against the glass. The regulator clock kept its patient count. Somewhere Tio successfully freed himself from the umbrella and made a noise of pure triumph that neither of us acknowledged. She was, Dante said at last. Loved, 3 syllables, weight enough to bury everything that had needed burying. I tucked the medal inside my collar, close to my skin, where it had always been. St. Michael with the bent wing and the repaired clasp, and the hollow ring that had carried proof through 20 years of carefully maintained silence. It was warm now. It was mine and his at once. It was my mother's last best act and Lucia's memory, and the night in the rain, and every restrained, impossible, finally chosen thing between us. He held the door. I stepped into the cold April evening, where Tio was narrating his umbrella victory to Enzo, who was ignoring him with professional finesse. And Rosa was leaning out the window, telling everyone to move before the sauce became cement. Dante locked the shop behind us. His hand found mine on the step. The metal clicked once softly against his ring. Same sound as the first night. Same cold silver, completely different world. I still wondered sometimes whether love could justify the darkness that shaped it. I suspected I would wonder that for the rest of my life, and that the wondering was itself a kind of answer. You do not ask that question about things that cost you nothing. You only ask it about the things you would choose again at full price, eyes open, standing in the rain. We walked to the car together. The street was ordinary. The rain was ordinary. The light from Rose's window was warm and yellow and entirely unearned by anything the world owed us. It was, without question, the most radical thing we had ever survived. there is one thing I never told you. On the night Dante put the ring on my finger, after Tio's cake demand and Rose's refusal, and the house going quiet at last, I lay awake for an hour with my hand on Dante's chest, feeling his heartbeat, even in slow, beneath my palm. I thought, he will never be safe. This world will never be clean. Something will come some year, some season, and I will stand in a hallway and be afraid again. And I thought, yes. And I will still be here. That question has no easy answer, not for me, maybe not for you. Would you have walked back into that house, not because you were trapped, not because you had nowhere else, but because you looked at a man, the world built for war, and decided you wanted to be the one who saw him be something else? Have you ever loved someone enough to choose the cost with open eyes and call that freedom instead of surrender? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to know what happens when Cesar's trial opens old doors that were never meant to close, and a woman from Dante's past arrives with a face that looks too much like Lucia's, comment. Part 2 below. The end, she was thrown out in the rain, until the Mafia boss recognized the necklace she wore, a complete story. Every door opened here is closed here. Every promise kept.